How many people are growing in high tunnels right now? Excellent. How many people are thinking about it? Very good. How many people who are thinking about it are basically more or less kind of convinced that they're going to do it? Most of you. Okay. Well, hopefully, and I heard this from a number of speakers, okay? And of course, the planning committee and all the people involved with putting this program together are very, very, very committed to one thing, and that is providing a balanced and comprehensive as we can provide presentation on high tunnels today. It's clear that we will not be able to address each and every question, but it's also clear, as I think Keith brought up, you know, a few years ago when you mentioned tunnels, people thought you were digging in the dirt. It's a different scenario right now. There's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of interest about high tunnels, and for good reason. As we go along, as an industry and as individuals, we have encountered challenges, and we will continue to encounter challenges. And some of them will change. They'll get more complex. So, again, the balanced perspective is very, very important. So if there's something that's kind of like anti-high tunnel, if you will, it needs to be heard. Okay? We're not questioning motherhood or apple pie or anything like that. We're questioning how a high tunnel will fit into your scheme of your farm operation, or how it does. For the people who are farming with high tunnels now, please raise your hand if you also have open field production. Most. If you could raise your hand if you're farming in high tunnels only. Nobody. For those that raised your hand the first time, just a couple of comments. I mean, David, why high tunnels and the field?
I mean, it's feasible. I kind of like to put everything under high tunnel, but that's not feasible. It has to be high enough value.
So to paraphrase, he said if he could, he'd put everything in a high tunnel, but it's just not feasible. And so to put something in the tunnel has to be high enough value to warrant it. Is that right? Okay. Bob, if I could pick on you in the back, open field and high tunnels, why both? Timing. So in other words, your supply is lengthened by the tunnel. Any other comments? Raise your hand again if you have both high tunnels. Why high tunnels and why?
I'm mainly in salad production, and that way I can go all the way through the winter pretty much.
Okay.
And spinach too, so.
Okay.
Increase
Where do you live?
in Michigan.
And are you growing salad in the open field?
Yeah, during the summer. It's a much reduced amount that I'm producing in the winter, but it helps pay the bills. So.
Keeps going.
Yeah.
Okay. Another hand for somebody who's growing with both? Yes, Fred.
Longer season.
Longer season. So we hear timing, at least if I'm hearing right, timing 3 times over. Fred, James, and Bob saying timing, it lengthens the season. And that might be perhaps the first reason why folks become interested. And I know Keith and the rest of the panel will have their own perspective on that, both as growers and others. But again, there's still some lingering questions about design. And if I count right, I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 12 questions at least written, and I know that others will come up during the discussion. Again, we won't be able to, 13. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we will save them. And so when there is another program or follow-up for extension or other people to deal with, we'll try to get those questions answered. I tried, with my limited abilities, to put them in some groupings, if you will, because some of the themes were coming out. We had a question earlier about varieties. I'm going to expand that question to the panel and just ask, what plants, if any, have you found that do not grow well in a high tunnel?
In Kansas, I would say that almost, you see, I've grown a lot of crops in high tunnels, and leafy greens, spinach, and solanaceous crops, and we've grown small fruit in the hay grove, and the one thing that hasn't grown well for me in the hay grove, but I think it's totally because of in my hands, was asparagus. And I ended up being able to make a deeper trench out in the field than in the tunnels. And so asparagus in the tunnels in my hands didn't produce as well. But I think there are places in the world where they grow asparagus in tunnels, and it gives you earliness and you know, sometimes things don't, there's things that really make a lot of sense to grow in tunnels. And so you look around and see what are people doing. And clearly tomatoes, early tomatoes, is like that's what people are, you know, probably that's a main thing people are doing in tunnels. Overwintering spinach. I mean, overwinter leafy green production. That really makes sense because you can't grow out in the field in the middle of the winter. And, you know, you can grow spinach. The thing that, what else? Oh, I grew onions this year, you know, sweet onions inside and outside. And I don't think there was any difference. Sometimes there's not much difference. And especially if you wait till the middle of the summer and plant, which I sometimes do because I not, you know, getting right in that early window when I should be, you know, then the advantage may be lost. So, but everything is as good or better almost consistently. And by the way, I grew rhubarb, which you might say, why in the world waste your time? But we got 3 times as much rhubarb in the tunnel as we did outside, so that was kind of interesting.
I like rhubarb pie, so I'll be by. Otho, I'll skip you just for a moment and ask Keith, since you grow so many crops, what, if any, failed or done poorly?
In our operation, basically, the big question has come down to everything I've ever put in there has outperformed outside growing, and we've been outside growing for a long time. My grandparents started doing flowers in '64, so we think we know what we're doing outside. We put these things inside, and it's just unbelievable. The production we get, the timing is always earlier. Some crops I'm able to get 3 to 5 weeks ahead of my outside production. So really the question comes down to, and as people that are trying to make a living doing this, you'll probably appreciate this, not which grows the best, but what sells the best. And that's really the key. You know, you want to find the variety that, you know, I can plant anything in there and it's going to grow better, but some things are going to sell better because of the timing, because of what they are and everything. And I think, as Ted said, tomatoes are very good, early tomatoes, because there's such a price disparity between early season tomatoes and mid-season tomatoes. Another item that a lot of our customers are looking at is raspberry production, because raspberries are so temperamental. They don't enjoy wet weather at all, and you can produce them earlier and better in tunnels. Sweet cherries is another one. That's a little bit more involved, but there's a lot of Michigan growers looking at sweet cherries. There's a lot of growers in Pennsylvania already covering sweet cherries. So there's a lot of things out there, but again, usually it comes down to the dollar. You know, which one's going to make you the most money and which one's going to perform consistently.
Go ahead, Kip.
Anybody have experience with late season tomatoes? You know, you get past that rush and then you hit October and everybody wants them again.
And the only customer that I can think of off the top of my head, and Ted alluded to him earlier, is Steve Groff at Cedar Meadow Farm, and Steve's pretty well known. He's been doing very well, and I think he's using, I'm not even sure of his varieties anymore, it's been a while, but he's gone as far as I think first or second week in November, where he's still producing tomatoes. Now, he has been using determinate varieties, and I think Mountain Spring is the one that he's been working with predominantly. But, you know, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when late blight really knocked out tomato production in the Mid-Atlantic in particular. There was some bad weather in California and Florida, so there was a big premium on tomatoes, and Steve was making a killing because he was one of the only guys that was producing not just a small amount, but a large amount of high-quality tomatoes at that time, and he was getting same prices in November that he was getting at the early part of the season when he was the only guy then as well.
Could I speak to that one moment? I talked to Ed Person yesterday. Ed Person is the fellow in New Hampshire who's a grower and who also makes the high tunnels. And I think, Matt, you have a Ed Person tunnel here, don't you? Yeah. He's growing tomatoes. He's been growing them for several years. He has a fall crop right now. He says the quality and the flavor is not as good now as it would be in the summertime. They grow more slowly. They ripen more slowly. And the flavor does not develop as well in the fall, especially late fall, as they do in the spring and the summer. So that's just one comment I'll pass on about tomatoes.
I'd like to switch gears, if you will. If I'm right, if I'm hearing correctly, the consensus view is that basically if you can grow it anywhere, you can grow it in a tunnel. I may have said that poorly, but basically you can grow anything in a tunnel. Sweet cherries. We haven't said much about brambles today. Raspberries, strawberries, small fruit. I know that there has been some work in different places with putting fruit trees in tunnels. Just about any vegetable. We heard rhubarb. So
Let me mention sweet corn. Sweet corn grows well in high tunnels, but as you know, there's no return on the dollar. However, it might be a good possibility for growing baby corn, where you put it really thick, because it grows extremely well in the high tunnels. The corn does. So baby corn might be a good possibility if you have a market for it.
okay, so maybe the final statement on that for the moment is not so much what can you grow, but what can you sell and make the return on investment that I think Dave brought up first, right? You'd like to put everything in the tunnel, but only some things can justify it. Getting back to a design question, question from the audience. Each of you has a different type of tunnel. Why did you choose the ones that you did? Why did you reject the ones that you did? And are you happy with what you chose? And before I turn it over to the panel, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ted, you're in a rare position university-wise. You have both Haygrove and not Haygrove. So you mentioned once that the microburst knocked them all down. But why did you choose the ones that you chose, and are you happy?
Well, actually, I started out with a PVC tunnel, which everybody says, oh gosh, just stay away from that. And I chose that because a grower had been using that PVC tunnel for several years, and we got they got a SARE grant, and they put one on my experiment station. So that worked, and theirs didn't get blown down. There are problems. The PVC and the polyethylene may react together and break down the poly. Anybody who sells poly says don't do it. But it works, and we had some discussion on the listserv. There's a girl, actually in that information packet I put, I didn't mention about it, but there's a good listserv if you're on email, and you can get on and kind of ask questions, and you get a group of people answer. And, there was some discussion on this, and people said, some people came out and said, I wouldn't have been able to afford it if I hadn't gotten a poly one and a PVC one, and it worked fine for me for a little while. And so the end result was in some cases that's fine. The other ones that we used were Stuppy, which is from North Kansas City. It's a local greenhouse manufacturer. It was logical for us to use, and they were quite fine. According to what I understand, as far as greenhouse manufacturers go, they tend to be a little bit on the pricey side. From what I hear, all Farm Tech, of course, everybody gets the Farm Tech catalog and thinks about buying theirs, and they're pretty competitive. But this is not an advertisement or anything. This is just kind of what I hear. Well, they're a little complicated to put up. They don't come with very good instructions, so you have to be kind of smart. And I've heard good things about Atlas, the Atlas tunnels. People, kind of say that, and they're from Georgia. They're very competitive and really high quality steel, and even with the shipping, that's all I have to say about that. As far as the Haygrove goes, well, I thought, we've got two different kinds. Let's be a center of excellence, and that was, maybe that was wishful thinking, it's the Haygrove is the one that you take the top poly off and put it on is a very different. It's really quite a different tunnel than a standalone tunnel, and but still really has it's great. You can cover at a lower price, cover a large area. And like I said, you just need to have a crew. You need to know how to grow. It's the people who are successful with them are really excellent growers, and I would echo that business about small fruit too, by the way, that tomatoes and small fruit brambles really seem to be what people really grow successfully in them.
Otho, various inputs on why you design, ultimate decision there.
Well, we have two designs. I worked with in my research I had 12 tunnels at one time. They were all 14 feet wide at that time and 20 or 36 feet long, and had the Quonset and also the slightly A-frame or Gothic. And certainly the Quonset they're not for snow. I mean, just forget the Quonset if you're in a snow area, because you'll either have to prop them up or put in heat. and you don't want to do that. So I suggested at least get a design that has a slight Gothic design or A-frame, so the snow will slide off. It's important when you get a 12-inch snowfall that the snow slides off then. And, you don't want it to build up. And if it builds up, it's just too late. However, if you get a snowfall of 12 inches and all slides off on the sides, and then you don't do anything with the snow, and if you get another snowfall the next day of 12 inches, and it slides off and builds up, you still going to have some problem with the sides. So you still have to deal with the snow, but it's not going to break in the tunnel if it slides off first. Okay, so I say don't go with the Quonset.
If I could jump in really fast, we had 3 questions that related to the design, if you will, the A-frame Gothic or not, and about snow load. Let me just really quickly say what, cite those questions before we get to addressing them. Is there a difference in snow load capacity, heat diffusion, or other issues on different designs such as Gothic, round? What about spacing of the arches? Do you remove snow load or don't you bother? And please comment on the durability of various shapes and sizes: width, Gothic, round, straight side, round top, 12, 16, 24, 30-foot widths. As you can see, the snow load issue, I think for at least many people, is a question, and also the Gothic versus not Gothic. Aaron, Keith, Otho, Ted, you want to comment on your experiences with that?
Well, I've seen the Quonset go in, and I haven't seen the Gothic go in, with snow. So that's my experience. Okay.
The Quonset be the round, is that right?
Yeah, completely round.
Yeah, that's what we have. And we haven't had any problems so far with snow or ice, but you're always concerned if you have a snowfall. We know it could happen.
What's your arch spacing?
4 feet.
4 feet. And you heat, right?
Yes, we heat.
So do you think that heating contributes to your snow removal?
Yes, it does. If you're in the planting stage, it does. But there's like in January and December, you don't have to heat in.
The idea with my structure with the hay grove is that we don't have snow on the structure. That's one of the reasons that hay grove is going to run cheaper per square foot. Our arch spacing, leg spacing is 7 feet 3 inches. And the idea is that I cover mine first week of April and hope we don't get a late heavy wet snow. And I take the cover off generally in November, usually end of October. Usually we don't have to worry about fall snows. The spring is when you have to worry about it. Now we have had about a 5-inch wet heavy snow on ours right after we covered it. Of course, 2 days after we covered it, it snowed and we had to go out there and bump it off. So it can sustain some. I guess the company line is none, but the reality is it can handle some snow. And these solo structures that we're talking about today, they're a little bit stronger, a little lower to the ground. They're designed to handle just a little bit more. So nobody likes to put a number on it, but there is some snow protection or some snow loading that can happen on hay groves, but they're not designed for it.
One second, if I could. The OSU Integrated Pest Management Program. The OSU Integrated Pest Management Program is a major sponsor of this workshop. Dr. Joe Kovach is here, who directs that program. Ron Becker's in the back. If you don't know Ron works with the IPM program, and there are many other folks who do as well. As such, one of the overarching themes of this whole workshop is, of course, making high tunnel production work, particularly from the perspective of what we call integrated crop management. We're hearing pieces about design. We've already talked about soil and site selection. We're going to hear later today about disease management. We're going to hear later today about insect management, fertility, and so on. We're going to start kind of tearing the system down into these individual pieces. But of course, all of you as farmers don't operate that way. You don't think, well, disease and insect. You have to make the whole system work. So as we go along today, even though we might be focusing on one particular issue at a time, certainly all of you who are practicing high tunnel users know it doesn't work that way in real life, that you have to make the whole thing work. So I am, if it's okay, we'll come back to your question in just a moment, going to return to this issue of movable or permanent. because it seems to flavor just about everything else that's done. And there was a question asked, would the panel or people in the audience go into the specifics of building high tunnels on skids with considerations on anchoring? And I think what that seems to imply is, how do you anchor them if they're meant to be movable? Anyone on the panel want to comment on the movable tunnel?
What I've seen people do is they'll just get this regular tunnel. I mean, whatever the spacing is that hoops are, let's say good quality, good heavy gauge steel and 4 foot apart hoops and so on, and they'll put it on an angle iron, just weld the base to the angle iron, and then they'll have like a couple holes in the little rings welded onto the angle iron, and then they'll just tie it down like you tie down a trailer, with the earth anchor, and so you screw that out and pull hook it up somehow to a tractor and pull it, it's like on a bed that can slide, you pretty much back and forth. And then those kind of anchors for trailers are what people use, and they seem to do, well, maybe they don't do a very good job with trailers, but then.
Aaron, did you want to add anything?
What we use for anchoring is just like an anchor you use to anchor a corner post. It's got like an auger in the end, and tie it down with a tight-on strap. You can go up to we go up to where we got a 2x6 for the curtains, where we tie the curtains to, and we tie it down with a tight-on strap there. And also, I think you should, even though you don't have a movable tunnel house, you should do it even if it isn't movable.
I'm looking for Daniel Yoder. Daniel, are you with
CBS
us?
Supply?
Yes.
He's
in the back. Daniel, what have you seen or heard about the movable tunnel issue? I'll bring you the mic, and that'll help people to hear you. I'm putting Daniel on the spot. Obviously, this was not pre-planned or anything, but I know that Daniel works with a lot of folks who in the area who are either thinking about putting up a tunnel or have put up a tunnel, as does Keith and other people. But on this, as you can see, I'm kind of poking hard at this issue of movable, and would just like Daniel's quick comment on what he's seen in that area.
Well, I think that if you're serious about high tunnels, you'll eventually, in our area anyhow, get to where you think you'll want to have them portable. Just because of less labor to move them and all that, because you'll have to rotate to get away from diseases. As far as anchoring, I think you just have to have that mindset when you start in. You're going to have to spend a little time and money to anchor them right, and then you'll be okay. As far as anchors, I think the turn-in earth anchor they were talking about, the trailer anchor, that's what we use. And we like to just turn them all the way in and just bolt them right to the frame. That's the way I prefer to fasten them. And then we use like a 30-inch, turn it all the way in and bolt it on with a 1/2-inch bolt. That's as solid as you can get. And that's the key, is to keep it from starting to flop, because that's when you have problems. And that's where I think a lot of people in our area could improve, is taking care of their plastic, fastening it right and keeping it from flopping. So don't have much experience, but that's what I hear, so that's all.
How big a tunnel can you move?
Well, what impressed me most was what I saw up in Aylmer, Canada. It was at Mark Stoll's. He has a 24-foot wide tunnel. It's very simple. It's built on skids. He uses an anchor at each corner, and he has these 24 by 48 sections that he connects. and he has a 24 by 900 greenhouse. And so he moves these things in sections. He just puts a wheel under each corner, and I'm pretty sure this is right. That he used 3 guys in 7 hours. They moved a 24 by 900 greenhouse over to a new section. So that really fascinated me, and we're working on that. I think we're going to be able to come up with something similar to that. But I think that has the most potential that I know of. That type of.
24 by 900, 7 guys, or 3 guys, 7 hours. I told Raymond Yoder and Fred Finney, I think it was in January this year when we were at the Growers Congress, I said the grower community is going to by far outpace at least what I can do and other people I think can do within the university setting in high tunnel design and innovation. They're out there every day. They're pushing the envelope. They're trying to meet markets and do what they do best. And so when you hear innovations like Mark's in Canada about 24 by 900 structure getting moved in 7 hours by 3 people, you just scratch your head and say, that is just amazing. I wonder if I could put the question to the high tunnel growers now. Why movable? What are you achieving by making them movable? And I think we will hear more on this issue later today. But if 1 or 2 of you would be willing to address, why put the effort into making them movable? Any volunteers? Go ahead, Fred.
Disease control.
Disease control.
And we basically don't have any fumigants available that we can use in a high tunnel that are very effective. So, especially if you're growing tomatoes, if it gets Garcinia, you really got to move the greenhouse or the high tunnel.
So disease control, essentially soil-borne disease control. Soil-borne disease control. Eric?
I guess the question that I have is, all these growers that are growing strictly tomatoes, are they growing other crops as like a cover crop or something between the crops? Or are they going strictly tomatoes?
I can comment on that. Up at Michigan State, what we do is exactly what you're saying, that we may grow tomatoes in most of the tunnel or in part of the tunnel each year, but we're growing year round, so we're having maybe 4 or 5 or 6 different crops between planting those tomatoes back in. So in a way, it's not an annual rotation where we're having to wait 3 years. We may have something where it's also almost like an annual rotation, but multiple times within that 1 year, so that we aren't having disease pressure, we aren't having insect pressure, because we're having all those different crops between the tomatoes. So I think you're right on with talking about that as having the crops in between them.
Good point. So if I understood you correctly, you're rotating in the tunnel. Yeah, very much. Okay. Scott, want to comment?
Well, a lot of the technology I use ends up using me, and so I was just thinking that, if it's all just for a high value crop and you're just strictly looking at square feet, how much money will I get per square foot, then that would drive you toward disease pressure, because it would drive you toward just a few crops that you're ultimately not doing lots of rotations, and you're not saying, well, that's okay, I'll just put some oats in there this year and plow it under, because you've got plastic overhead that you're paying for. So it's just something to think about, I guess. And I like that idea, though, that not only are you rotating annually then, but you're on the good side of the technology, you could rotate frequently within a year, a number of times within a year, and that should help with disease pressure, at least for some things, maybe not for tomatoes.
That's an excellent point. If I heard you correctly, disease pressure is going to happen because you're committed to just the top dollar and the same crop over and over again, perhaps. Did I capture it right? The square foot. And obviously that's a very delicate balance to strike. It's standing here as a university person, it doesn't give me a whole lot of credibility to say, well, don't go after the top dollar, right? we know we have to do that. But then there's that question of what's the best way, and I think we're hearing some good input. One of the most undesirable jobs as a moderator is to be the timekeeper also. And we're at a point in the program where we need to take a break. I want to thank the panelists, some of whom will return, and we'll hear more from. If we could give them a round of applause and express our appreciation to them. We are entering, we've actually completed segment 2, if you're keeping track on the high tunnel design and construction, and now we'll take a refreshment break. And there are refreshments in the back, and please be back and ready to go in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.